Welcome everyone to JavaScript Programming Language course for beginners. This video is an introduction to JavaScript. You will also see the source and reference for this video. I hope you'll be able to follow along this entire JavaScript course. Coming up next are the prerequisites in this lesson. We have the MAMP server or WAMP server, Apache server, Sublime Text Editor, Console tab, htdocs folder, and localhost 8888. These applications and folders should be active in your machine at the background. As you watch this video, please bear in mind about our ESLRs. And these are right thought, right communication, right attitude, right conduct, and right lifestyle. We are now in section 2.4, variable scope and hoisting in JavaScript. And we are going to explore the JavaScript's variable declarations and hoisting. We'll open Google Chrome browser and right-click in the browser, then inspect. Choose the console tab. And to open the console tab, the shortcut key for Windows would be Ctrl-Shift-J, and Mac would be Command-Option-J. A variable scope is pretty important to understand. In the previous video, we talked about the global scope and how any variables that are created outside of a function. We'll have an example, var foo equals hi, and this will exist and be accessible anywhere. But if you create a variable inside of a function, var username equals, so the username would be somsak, this variable name will not be available, at least not outside of the function. So this is our function. But inside of the function, sure enough, you can use the variable username. That fundamental is how variable scope works. You can use the username variable anywhere within its lexical scope, which again is just a fancy phrase for between the curly brackets. I have these curly brackets here of the function. There are a couple reasons that you might want to do this. Function say hi, username. So we'll remove this. So instead of doing something like this, we're doing it in this revised example. So creating the username variable outside of the scope, and then I'm using the variable inside, but the scope of the username variable is wherever it's declared. In this case, it's declared as the global variable. This one here. This is the global variable. And if I refresh the console, sure enough, does exist. It's undefined. Username is undefined. And if I call say hi, it's still undefined. Username, and we got somsak there. So that's actually this one here in our function. Username equals somsak. And all of a sudden, username has a value of somsak. I guess I should make this function actually say hi while I'm at it. Let's add it here. Alert hi. Don't forget your semicolon there. That's all well and good. But the reason we don't want to do this all the time is that some other part of our code, or maybe some plugin that we're using, might use the name username as a global variable. This one here. And then they'll be stamping all over our variable and messing us up, or vice versa. So we want to avoid those kind of collisions. We have variable scope to the rescue. If I do it this way, the username variable only exists within these brackets. It only exists within this bracket. And once it gets to the closing bracket, kaboom, it goes away. So that means outside of this function, if anyone tries to use the username variable, they won't be accessing this variable. In this case, they'll get a reference error, or if another plugin is using the variable name, they'll be accessing that variable and not this one here. Let's us name things very simply, like var number 5. Let's have another example here. Var num equals 5. Don't forget your semicolon. And num, this one here, num, is a horrible, horrible variable name. If you remembered, we discussed about reserved words. Yeah, someone might have reserved that name. And this is actually a global variable because anybody might accidentally use num. But because it's scope, or it's exclusive to this function, we don't have to worry about anyone else messing up our variable here. We don't have to worry about messing up anyone's else variable as well. We can add alert. We'll add alert here. Your favorite number is 5. So alert added here. Now I'm gonna rearrange this. Sometimes we might be tempted to do something like this. Now I'll explain string concatenation in more details in another video. But if I have to say, this just says, hi somsak, this part here, hi somsak, your favorite number is 5. And if we refresh Google Console, and I call say hi, sure enough, hi, your favorite number is 5. Now we might expect this to behave very simply. We might expect it to create a variable username, set it to somsak, alert hi somsak, then create the variable num, set it to 5, and then alert your favorite number is 5. But it turns out JavaScript actually works slightly different. Now there isn't really a great justification for this behavior from our perspective. The reason why this happens is because of the way JavaScript interpreters are implemented. That's a good thing to know about. So if I go up here, I say alert num. Actually, even better, I'm gonna say, let's console log num. When alerting back variables, console log tends to be a lot more reliable. So if I run say hi, it says undefined. Hi somsak, your favorite number is 5. Now, we'll ignore that last undefined, this part here. That's just the return of the function say hi, which is nothing, because we don't return anything down here. But you might say, hey, wait a second, Somsak. We're trying to access a variable which we haven't even created yet. And we know from experience, when we try to access the variable blah, let's example there. We don't get undefined. We get a reference error. And well, it turns out the way JavaScript actually runs this is it runs through the first time. And it create a variable username, create a variable num, so the username and variable num, or it runs any of this code. Then the second time it runs through, the second pass, it actually executes our code. So if we were to rewrite this code in the way that JavaScript actually runs it, interpreters actually run it, it would more look like this. So it instantiates the variable up the very top, this part here, and then it assigns it here. And that's why when we console log num, this part here, we get undefined instead of reference error. So the name for this is hoisting. Hoisting seems a little bit misleading. To me, the word hoisting tends to imply that all of its variables are hoisted up at the top, but it's only the variable declaration, not the assignment. Var num is the declaration of the variable's existence, if you will, and then num5 is where we actually set it. Keep that in mind, that in just general going forward, that when you create a variable down below, the variable itself gets created up above, even though it doesn't get assigned until later. Now, for that reason, a lot of people will say it's best practice to put all of your variable declarations up at the top and then use your variables down below. I tend to agree also, because then you can see at a glance all of the variables that are within your current scope. You don't have to go hunting through all of your codes to find them. In addition, it tends to minimize confusion caused by variable hoisting. Just to summarize what we've got, or what we have gone through this video, variable scope is defined by the curly brackets of the function. So this is our function and we have the curly brackets here. So variable scope is defined only within these curly brackets. Username and num, this part here, do not exist outside of this function. But the variable foo, this one, variable foo up here does. This is outside of our function. And secondly, variable hoisting, you can add here var bar equals hi. So we have this new variable here. And if we make a variable down here, the var bar hi, the var bar part will be hoisted up to the top. That's hoisted here. And then bar will be assigned to hi down below. Now this does seem a little bit strange. It is one of JavaScript's idiosyncrasies, but it's definitely something that is good to know about. When you have an error caused by a misunderstanding of hoisting, you could remember, oh yeah, there's that hoisting thing. Let me go research that and see if that's what's causing the problem. But once again, this one here, you can avoid it generally by declaring all your variables at the top of the scope that the variables exist within. Now, one last note about variable scope. You can actually have two var foos. So I'm gonna get hey, I'm gonna get hi. I'm not gonna get hi, okay? So we'll get the hey here, not the hi. And that's because this variable, var foo hey, is in a closer scope. they are not variables. So the innermost scope is what's gonna win. So this is the innermost hey, and that's what JavaScript will run. And not just win in that way, it will actually be faster as well. Marginally faster, but faster nonetheless. So if you're doing something in a loop and you're doing it again and again and again and again, generally speaking, you'll get performance benefits. And if you declare your variables, var foo hey, in the current scope or closer scope, the farther out you need to go in terms of scopes, and you can have scopes within scopes because you can put functions inside of functions. The farther out you have to go, the slower that variable lookup as it's gonna be, and the slower your app is gonna be. That's not something to worry too much about, but it is something that's good to know about. For when you have more complicated apps or when you're doing something over and over again and you want to improve your performance. So that does it for this video on variable scope and variable hoisting. For our web quest, we'll do an online research and read about the variable scope and hoisting in JavaScript. Thank you for watching this video.